Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk, interviews with the living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, our guest is Katya Batalya, and she is awesome. I wish I had like a deeper thesaurus on hand, but she basically answered every single question I had, not only succinctly, but like with clarity and depth, and then it caused me to think of new things that I want to think about. And so I can't think of anything I'd rather have in any given day than new food for thought, as I like to say. So I'm especially thankful to her and everything she brought to the show. She gets into some really interesting concepts, and we talked about the body, mind, soul apparatus, how they're interplaying, what the chakras are, and how that involves with it. But she brings like a really scholarly and academic approach to her explanations for things that are beyond the current scope of our scholarship and academic settings in the West. I think in certain settings they are a part of it, but they're definitely not a part of it in most normal cultures, even in the East at this point. And I say that having lived in Thailand and explored a lot of Asia, but it's not to say that there aren't people everywhere who are into these things. It's more that I think what she's really good at and what you're going to experience with this episode is like a cultivated language to help explain things that are beyond language. She mentions, that we're linear beings and we think linearly, but a lot of my questions are beyond linearity. So the answers, of course, can't be. And I just appreciated that. I liked, there's a way to help someone educate themselves, which is what Katya was doing with me, without making them feel like a buffoon or an ignorant or an idiot. And I just really appreciated the depths of her wisdom and the way she speaks and approaches the world. We recorded this a few days after the United States attacked Iran and is now in like presumably another long war, or even it's a short one. We're just in another war, and she is not a U.S. citizen, nor has she ever been. So it was nice of her to kind of help me talk about the political part of that's going on. Or I shouldn't say the political part, the geopolitical part, because there's a difference. But the point being, like, where karma and where identity gets involved with all of that. And so I just really appreciated her and this interview. Like I said at the beginning of this little spiel, it's just, I don't know, like I'm just seeking new experiences and seeking growth. And sometimes I get what I ask for and I regret it because growth doesn't always feel easy, like sometimes you're trying to like gain muscle and you work out and then you're sore the next day, but then the muscle's there. So I see life the same way. So nothing she said upset me, and it's not like I'm going to be sore from this interview, but I'm trying to explain that each experience that comes hands us unique lessons, and I think Katya really got me thinking about all that and more. I also should mention, because it only came up at the very end of the interview, that she does have a book out, so there will be a link for how to find it and buy it. And like I said, she's really good at explaining things, so I imagine her book is excellent. And believe it or not, I do often buy the books of my guests, so I have a feeling I'm going to be reading her book soon. But we talked about everything. We talk about psychoanalysis, Gnosticism, shamanism, indigenous teachings, meditation, yoga, moving, culture, language. It's a great interview, so I'm very proud to present it to you. And as always, thank you so much for supporting the show. We do continue to grow, and we're growing most of all on YouTube, which is exciting because I was never a real user of YouTube, but it's fun to be on something that seems to be pretty international at this point. So thank you to Substack for hosting us, and thank you to YouTube for also hosting us. But most of all, thank you to you, the listener or the viewer, whatever you call yourself, for tuning in. And I hope you enjoy this interview with Katya Batalya. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Coffin Talk, interviews with the living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, our guest is from off the coast of Auckland, New Zealand, and her name is Katya Batalya. And I told her I would mispronounce her last name, but not her first, so she'll let me know how I did on that. But she's an incredible person. We just started chatting, and I'm really excited to ask her a lot of follow-up questions about the following. She's a psychotherapist, a yoga, philosophy, and psychology teacher, an author, a mystic, and she's devoted to guiding souls on their journey of awakening, healing, and self-discovery. Moved by a deep reverence for the hidden wisdom that flows through all traditions, she has spent much of her life immersed in the holistic philosophies of the East and the psychological sciences of the West. So, Katya, our requisite first question we ask everyone after we welcome them to the show is, how old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. So I'm 43. I grew up in Portugal. I spent half my life in Portugal and then moved to New Zealand, spent the other half here. And I don't really feel like I belong to a particular generation, but in terms of like, I guess if that question is designed to understand a bit about me, I identify a lot with yoga culture, like the Eastern traditions and the philosophies that think deeply about life.
That's awesome. And we're about the same age. I'm 44, so we're from like according to American generation psychology, we're from no generation actually. We're in between. So, and my parents
Yeah,
are meditating hippies, so I can definitely dig the culture that you belong to as well. Um,
awesome, awesome.
and I
I've
was out.
I've actually had I've actually had the opposite journey because my parents are very much the opposite of meditating hippies. They're very strict, conservative people. My dad was in the military. My mom's a school teacher, like very. Uh, I haven't learned anything about spirituality as I was growing up, and life was not very deep. It was just about kind of getting a job and making it through life. So my journey was into hippie meditation.
That's awesome. And I don't know that many people from Portugal. I taught ESL in America for 10 years. And so I worked with a lot of Portuguese speakers from Brazil, but not as many from Portugal. But I everyone told me from Portugal, Lisbon and San Francisco are like twin cities. I don't know if you're from Lisbon area or but
Mm, yeah, originally, yeah. And then
um and when did you learn English? Because you have like perfect fluency and no real accent.
I had some family in the States, but it's a bit all over the place. And then I traveled the world a lot, in search for the answers to the mysteries of life, I guess. I've traveled South America and went on, the shamanic path through Peru and all those things. And then
Wow.
I traveled India and went on the yogi path and lived in ashrams. And so a bit of everything and nothing, really. So it's an English that is from everywhere and nowhere, a bit like me.
Ah, that's very cool. I can relate to some of what you said, and we'll probably get into that. What about like, do you dream in Portuguese or do you dream in English?
I guess in English, yeah. It's been a
Okay,
long time since I lived in Portugal. New Zealand is really where I identify with.
cool, very cool. And yeah, and I did shamanic experiences in Ecuador, not in Peru, but I'm curious, were those like many years ago or recently?
My shamanic journey is more recent. Over the last kind of, I guess, 3 or 4 years. So yoga started my journey into spirituality and I guess the higher kind of dimensions of, meditation and living a peaceful life and finding, my love and my heart and my intuition, the higher chakra kind of things. And then I felt myself a bit ungrounded, not feeling very spiritual and very at one with the universe, but a bit disconnected from the universe at the same time, if that makes sense. So not really connected with the earth itself and the world of humans and animals and trees and all those things. So then I went into more of that shamanic world and yeah, and even these days, like one of the practices I have for myself now is medicine songs. So chants, like basically chanting to the earth and chants about love and connection and oneness and spirit and nature. And so that's one of the practices that I got from a number of different traditions, and now I am sharing it because I find it very grounding and it immediately transport, I find that singing immediately transports you into a very deep state. So picking up bits and pieces.
That's a great answer, and it reminds me of a previous guest who was talking similarly about dancing and movement of the body. That like these things can really take us out of this like ego-driven mind and this experience of like insulation. And I'm actually curious. I have never done psychotherapy. I would have loved to do it when I was younger because I was just obsessed with all things like psychoanalysis, and I didn't read a lot of Freud, but I liked Jung a lot. How how do you feel about like just the Western culture's adoption of Freud and psychoanalysis and all that, and then now we're kind of moving into this like plant medicine, yoga, and spirituality? Like, do you feel like there's a lot of similarities? Do you think they're bifurcated? Any answer is fine, obviously.
Well, all of the above, really. I find in some things they contradict each other, and other things they're very connected. And I find that this kind of represents the world in a way at this stage. In a way, it's a bit fragmented. There's a lot of value to psychology, just classical psychoanalysis and all those things. They bring the science, they bring the understanding of the human psyche. But in the way that Freud brought it, for example, it's just a fragment and therefore incomplete. So it's missing so many pieces, like our connection with nature and what that brings for us, how it grounds us and nourishes us, the connection with community and like the sense of belonging to a tribe or to a group of people. I mean, we have a bit of that with the nuclear family, like a mom and dad and a couple of brothers, but it's really not the same as belonging to a tribe, where you have a role and you have a society that supports you. The sense of course, spirituality. The sense of our ancestors being with us on the journey and spiritually, and their teachings, the sense of old people being wise and bringing that to the table rather than okay, we don't need them anymore, they don't contribute anymore. So there's just so much that has been lost while we only think about our emotions, right? Whereas the body in that, and as you say, dancing, you can't really be dancing in a way and be thinking about what you're planning for tomorrow, like
Mm-hmm.
unless you're really, really not present. But if you're dancing and other people are dancing around you and you're dancing with them, typically you're very present. If you're present, then your mind is not elsewhere, and it's actually doing what it's meant to do, which is supporting the present moment, and your energy is within you. It's present and it's nourishing you. So all those dimensions, I guess, were a bit lost on Freud in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why these shamanic traditions, they have the tools, for example, with getting the medicines from the earth to support us, right? Whether that's to create healing. So I've studied also a little bit, not too much, but a little bit with the Mayans in Guatemala. So
Cool.
how they go and harvest plants for healing, for support, like pregnant women or childbirth, or menstruation, or there was a lot of women's work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's specific days where you would go harvesting, specific days to create medicine, specific days to honor the not the gods, but like the archetypes that are sustaining the energy that we live by. So there's specific days for everything, and so it creates such a wholesome life,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so bringing in those medicines, of course, with shamanic traditions, there's the more psychedelic medicines as well that help people have that experience of spirit, that very very quickly achievable experience of spirituality and God and being at one with the universe. So all those things that the earth can give us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about hedonistic pleasure versus eudaimonia. Like the idea of like cultivating a lifestyle that makes you happy intrinsically as opposed to extrinsic. And when I brush up against my experiences with psychedelics and plant medicine, and it, it's like as an American, that's where I kind of like start to like worry about my culture, which is spreading across the globe, obviously. Meaning I would not want people to think there's a hedonistic pleasure route through those much more serious psychoactive drugs, but I still almost feel like is a net positive, even if someone does it for that like intention that I don't think is as noble. And then throwing that, what I just said, into what you said about elders and wisdom, I'm fascinated with this concept now because first of all, my parents are 79 and 78, 79, going on 79, 80. I recently read that every single president of the United States for the last six terms was born in the year 1947. So in other words, like we went from Bill Clinton, born in 1947, to George Bush, born in 1947, to Obama, who was born in 60 whatever, and then right
Well,
back to yeah. So the point I'm trying to make, and Biden was born in the same year as Trump. So we're looking at, and my issue with this is that a lot of people think like, well, they're elders, so they have wisdom, but then a lot of people, myself included, are like, yeah, but just the sheer fact that you age doesn't make you wise, you know, like
no.
and I never in a million years would want to put a international person on the spot to talk about American politics. So you can ignore what I said. I was only bringing up why it came up for me. But what do you think about like wisdom and aging and like where is the respect line and how should we be looking at that based on what you had said in your previous answer?
Yeah, that's a really, I guess, controversial and challenging topic, I guess, because some cultures more than others, particularly Asian cultures, are meant to have limitless respect for their elders, for example. No
Yeah.
matter how they act, they could be child abusers, and this
Yeah,
happens.
totally.
But they're meant to be treated as wise elders, almost gurus. And it's very tricky when you're dealing with someone who has that embedded in their culture. But also, those elders, some of them have very little wisdom. Just because you age doesn't mean you've learned anything about life. It doesn't mean they have any wisdom at all. I mean, hopefully, you've been given more opportunities to integrate wisdom, but that doesn't mean that you've taken them. And this is the beauty of the world around us. Life keeps bringing us opportunities. Like something terrible happens to you, you can learn from it and understand why that happened and why it doesn't need to happen again, what you were meant to learn from it and grow. Or you can just not learn anything, keep doing the same mistake over and over again, countless times. I think from a soul perspective, what I think all of these cultures have taught me, because they do have so much common ground from what I've observed, is that we are here to learn, to grow, to awaken, and to come to our full potential, and that life and the universe mysteriously keeps giving us opportunities to awaken and to grow
Yeah.
into that potential and learn what we need to learn, right? But that doesn't mean that we take those opportunities because we do have free will.
Mhm.
And often I see people not even in the mindset of taking those opportunities to learn. So being so close-minded and so arrogant in a way, this is the downside of Western society.
Mhm.
There's this arrogance in a way that, I think I know better.
Mhm.
Therefore, I'm here to teach.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem because it's not necessarily true. And then you keep putting things into the world that are toxic and creating karma, creating horrible problems around you and for yourself and for others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great answer. I mean, talk about a I don't ask like tricky questions, but I am obsessed with what we just talked about, and it connects to another issue you brought up, which is both the rejection and embracing of nature and like where we're at now. Because like when people say technology is antithetical to nature, I see technology as a product of nature, but I also see the abuse of technology abusing nature, so like I see a lot of like snakes eating tails and all that. But what I'm curious about is I've never had the opportunity to go to New Zealand yet. I've been to like 30 or 40 countries, but for many reasons that was really hard to get to, and it still is. Now I have two young kids, so like I'm looking at, probably 10 years from now. But you're not just living in New Zealand, you're living in an island off of New Zealand. New Zealand, and especially since they filmed The Lord of the Rings there, has, captivated, at least in America, as like almost everyone's attention for like the most drop dead gorgeous place on earth. what is it like living on an island next to an island? Like, I mean, how remote do you feel sometimes? Does it feel scary, dangerous? Does it feel perfect?
Oh, it's a little paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got for me the perfect balance between it's not crowded, but it has the minimum. It has a movie theater and this
Cool.
big supermarket, and those kinds of things. And so I feel like I've got the community around me. So it's small enough that people know each other and support each other. It's big enough that we have hardware store and all the things that we really need. And it does feel a bit remote. Like if anytime I have to visit someone, I have to take a plane to another country or something like that. But I feel like it's a bubble basically. What I feel about it really is that as you start to do this work of awakening, really, of finding the higher parts of being a human being, of working towards a more peaceful, more altruistic, more kind life. Then your vibration starts to shift in a way, and you attract different things. So I could never live in a city anymore. My God, like that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would just be so overwhelming. I don't know how people do it, but I've done it. Like I've lived in cities, I've lived in tiny apartments in the middle of thousands and thousands of people. With all those energies on top of me and all the noise and no stillness and but I've done it. I've done the thing. But these days, as I've started to do yoga and all those things, somehow when we shift the environment inside of us, I find that the environment outside of us changes as well.
Mm.
And naturally, I found myself moving to New Zealand, and naturally now I find myself moving to this island. But I feel like I haven't really done that. Too intentionally. I mean, there was an intention, but it was more like as a result of how I was feeling inside. What I'm trying to say is, I think the key thing is the inner work that we do, and everything else kind of just adjusts to that new reality. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, it totally does, and it segues perfectly into the next question. I don't plan my questions,
Hmm.
but we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
But your accolades, I mean, like your experience, you kind of hit what I call the trifecta of the human experience, which is the mind, the body, and then what I call the soul, the spirit, whatever
Hmm.
you want to call it. Like for example, I would say psychotherapy is designed to help you with your ego, your mind. Yoga, the asanas are designed to help you with your body. But then, of course, meditation is your soul. Like that's connection to like something way beyond this physical realm. My first question, I'll probably have two on this. And you also mentioned free will, which I'm obsessed with because I've heard and read and thought a lot about how like it could be predetermined to think you have free will that feels like free will. We'll shelve
Yeah.
that. We might not get into that, but when it comes to the body, the mind, and the spirit, like who's the boss? Like, is it a triangle? Is one on top? Is there a hierarchy? How do you see that with your unique experience? Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, the host of Coffin Talk, the show you're currently listening to, and I'm interrupting to ask you if you would mind doing me a favor and subscribing to my online publication called You Are Here on Substack. It features weekly essays. I also have fiction, and of course, there are links to the podcast and all the bonus episodes. It's completely free, and I would love your support. So please head over to mikeyop.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up today. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, that is the challenge of language and Western culture as well. We've created a language that allows us to separate those things,
Oh, nice.
when actually those things are one thing. They're one manifestation of consciousness.
Awesome.
So yeah, I don't really see them as separate. Everything in our mind is also manifesting through our body, and equally, if we have anything manifesting in our body, it means something for our psychic world and something for our spirit. So yeah, I wouldn't really see them as separate.
I used to be a teacher. A plus plus answer. I love that. That was like seriously great. And then it kind of begs for me this other question of like, so then what are emotions? Like, where do you see those fitting into the what we just talked about?
So emotions, as a part of that, they're a manifestation of these waves of the psyche and of thoughts and of spirit, so how it all comes together. So if I talk about the chakras, have you talked about the chakras before here?
No, no, please. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much into it because it's a huge rabbit hole. But so there's different aspects of human existence and how we're manifesting, and so each chakra is a center of energy and represents certain emotions, represents certain parts of the body and certain parts of our spirit. So, for example, let's say our heart chakra, it represents the emotions of love and connection and kindness and altruism and all those kind of emotions of connection. And it represents our in our physical body, it's in our heart, for example, and some organs that are related, and in our spirit. Our spirit manifests those qualities through the being connected with our heart and how it expresses in the world and expressing that spiritual energy through the world. So each chakra is related to particular energies, particular emotions, and if they are balanced, then that's what we'll experience when we're in our full potential, full love and light and compassion. If they're not balanced, then we experience the opposite, selfishness and our heart being closed. Maybe we have heart problems. So basically, we are either in our potential in each chakra, or we're not, and it's manifesting in certain ways. And then, of course, it manifests with other people as well. And if I talked about other chakras, it would be different emotions and
Yeah.
different parts of the body. This is just an example. So that's kind of how it fits together in yoga.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think anyone who's interested can look up the chakras and explore more on their own
Yeah.
time. But I think that was a perfect example. And it still kind of pushes me closer to like asking you. And again, I'm yielding to your expertise and your wisdom and your experiences. I know obviously that you don't know all the answers, but you have theories, and I'm compelled to ask you about them because
Yeah.
you seem reasonable. I'll be like, you seem like a very it seems like you don't just go to a place and then just say, "Oh, now I know everything." So, are we producing our thoughts and emotions, or are emotions and thoughts things that latch onto us? Neither or both? Like how do you see that going on in this experience that we're having?
Well, it's hard to, I guess, put it in such a linear way, something that
Yeah.
is
Okay.
so deep and complex. But let's put it this way. There's two, I guess, streams of things influencing us. Let's call it consciousness and ego.
Okay.
So consciousness is more like the pure spirit, and that pure potential and everything that we're capable of. And ego are all the blockages and the things that are not really aligned, not really conscious, and kind of asleep, kind of ignorance, we could call it.
Okay.
And the role, I guess, the purpose of life in a way, and all these lives that we go through one after another, if you believe that, is to uh, awaken our consciousness and release the ego in a way, transcend the ego. It's not even about releasing, but so for example, let's say that you're really harmful to others. You're creating a war, quite relevant these days, or you can only really do that if your empathy is not awakened. Like
Yeah.
if you're not compassionate, if you look at another person suffering, and there's other things that are more important to you, so because if your empathy is truly awake, you're not going to be able to cause suffering to another human being and be indifferent to it, right? So, as the I guess how life is meant to work in this yoga world, or these, I guess, deeper traditions, is we come from a place of unconsciousness where we can be selfish, we can do all sorts of things, we can harm others, But in doing that, we're creating some karma, we're creating some negative energy in the world that ultimately comes back to us so that we learn in our own skin how that feels. Once we learn that, of course, we're not going to do it again because we know exactly how that feels. This is why we need to go through multiple lifetimes. And this is why, in a way, death isn't really the end, because our soul journey continues so that until we really awaken all those capacities inside of us. So moving from unconsciousness to consciousness being the ultimate goal. And the tragedy of life, in a way, is when people not realizing that they continue to just, I guess, survive through life, not really awakening anything, just having their job that they do day after day, kind of asleep, going to their family, sometimes quite miserable, turning to alcohol, just having coping mechanisms because of never really having connected to these layers of the depth of life. And so for me, that's the real tragedy, is not really death, is what you let die inside of yourself while you're alive.
Wow.
So so to understand and be conscious of that soul journey and awakening through every circumstance in life is, for me, what really matters and what has an impact in both our journey and in other people's.
That's awesome. I really like what you just said about it. And we do ask every guest, what do you think happens when you die? You shifted into that in our conversation perfectly. I think what I'd like to ask as a follow-up to you is Katya going to come back, or is there a witness behind Katya that comes back? Like, how do you see that?
So, according to what I gather from these traditions, we have a consciousness. Whatever consciousness we've awakened, which I'm going to ask you. You can have a guess if you like. So, there's this tradition called Gnosticism. I don't know if you've heard of it, or Gnosis.
Yeah, little. Yeah.
So it tells us that we have a certain amount of consciousness awakened and a certain amount of ego. So, in a normal person, would you like to hazard a guess at what's the percentage of consciousness that we have awakened?
Oh, I mean, you're asking a 44-year-old American 3 days after we just bombed and attacked a country. So, an average person, like an average human being alive on this 8 billion populated Earth in 2026, I'm going to say 2% consciousness, 98% of the other.
You're very close, actually.
Yeah.
Very, very close. It's 3%. 3%
Yeah.
is what they say is the average awakened consciousness. But it's just a huge tragedy, really, if you think about it, right? In terms of what we've done with our lives. But yeah, so whatever consciousness we awaken through life, that's what we take to the next life. So that in the next life, we can attract things that will help us awaken more. And this is also to be said to be why we are born into, that family and that culture in the next life, is so that we are given a chance to awaken the other parts, right? Mm-hmm. If you've never really had determination in life, and, for example, and a sense of like power, you might be born into a culture where you feel really powerless, for example, and your spirit is so unsettled by that you have to conquer your inner power and your inner determination and kind of thrive in life. So, like you kind of put in the opposite circumstances in a way so that you awaken those parts in yourself. So, there is, in fact, a whatever we'd like to call it, there is a Katya that is going to the next life and awaken, 1% more or whatever that may be, and put in new circumstances to go on and on. What doesn't matter from a spiritual perspective is the material things that we achieve. Like great successes in a job and things like that. That is all kind of worthless from a spiritual perspective. You know, when you die, that's completely useless. So what you take with you is really what you've awakened, so which makes it uh, kind of almost the only thing that matters really in that sense.
Yeah. And it's really challenging growing up with socialization coming in one ear telling me your job is your identity, your career is all
Yeah.
that matters. Leave a legacy on earth that's related to your job. Did I mention job? Like job, it's not even in the American culture, it's actually less money and it's more status, in my opinion. And all of
Mm.
that comes at the cost of integrity, which is the thing you carry to the next life. And then the last thought I have on what you just said is also, unfortunately, the more consciousness I have, the less brash I am in denouncing those with less consciousness. Like there's a forgiveness and an understanding. So the same people who are horrifying me with their actions abroad and in geopolitics, and it's not just one man leading my country, it's a lot of people. I also don't feel like the best solution is to assassinate them, stop them, like bully
Mm.
them, like they need
No.
their growth too. But with young children, that's when it kind of gets harder for me. And not even my own young children, just literally all young children, like going and seeing children and being like, you're such victims of what you're inheriting. So yeah, you're food for thought. You gave me a lot of like things, and I really like what you said though. I think it's incredibly generous and compassionate, and it sits right with my intuition. It definitely feels accurate. What do you feel then? Because we're both on a podcast, and we both do have like non-altruistic interests, for lack of a better word. Like I do care less and less about my status, but I still care a lot about achieving a goal that I set in childhood. How do you deal with that imbalance, if you have it? I'm projecting it onto you, but I sense that you probably have to deal with that.
Wait, let me just get back to
Sure.
that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just say something about the governments because I feel like this is
Yeah.
quite
Please.
important these days.
Yeah.
So from a yoga perspective, the governments are simply a mirror of the state of consciousness of society. So it's very easy to blame governments, not with that we're doing that at all, but that's kind of very present in the world, and I'm blaming the government when we don't like something. But really, that's not, I guess, the solution. Moving forward in some ways. The solution is to change ourselves so that we are more awakened, more conscious, because the government will simply naturally reflect that. Once each of us has awakened more, we're not going to have governments that are bombarding each other. That's
Yeah.
just obvious. We would never really, it would just not even be a thing in that we would manifest
Yeah.
in this reality. So,
Well said.
yeah, does
Really.
that make sense? Yeah.
Yes. No. It
Mm.
definitely makes sense, and thank you. I'm really glad you elaborate on that. Thank you.
Okay, tell me more about your question.
Sure. How do you deal with the pressure of like goal setting and career and status when we know we're not going to carry it to the next world,
Uh,
but also there is something satisfying and it is fun to chase your curiosities. So like I often personally lament the fact that I got hooked on the wrong part of that. Like, so it's not that I shouldn't like quitting everything I do just to prove that I'm not status seeking isn't going to solve my issue. My issue is that I'm like seeking some sort of reward or end to like what I started, and I'm way too old now to like actually be fooled into that. And yet there's like a childlike part of me that keeps telling me don't quit, keep pursuing this goal. Like it's been your life dream, you should chase and manifest what you have. Like how do you, if you feel those pressures, how do you deal with it? And if you don't, psychoanalyze me.
well, I think those things are often signs. They're symbolic. They're signs that there's something in our soul that we really want to manifest in this world. They're not necessarily egoic. They might be things that relate to our gifts in life or to the potential that we haven't quite manifested yet. So I find that those passions are quite important while they are present because they allow us to contribute in meaningful ways and passionate ways. I think passion is such an important thing. I find that, for example, when I was there was a period of my life where I was really passionate about teaching yoga. And I feel like I haven't really done that enough at the time because I thought I'll do it another time, or maybe I just don't know enough yet, or whatever, that self-doubt. And now that I went through that entire journey, etc., and I know lots about yoga, I don't even feel like teaching that anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a time, and when that passion is present, it's so beautiful to actually create from that place. The issue with that is that sometimes that does come from an ego place. And this is why this work of purifying ourselves and aiming towards higher states of consciousness and awakening love and compassion and empathy, etc., is important. Because otherwise, if you might just have passions that are driven by, I want more money and status. And so, well, that's not going to create the same elevated things in the world, right? So as long as you're doing this work, like um, Buddha talks about surround yourself. What is it? The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha is like the light within, that wisdom and soul within. The Dharma is the spiritual teachings that you keep studying, keep being connected with those higher teachings, higher aspirations. And the Sangha, people who are on the same boat as you, learning. So if you keep connecting with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, you'll be able to keep learning and growing and awakening that consciousness, and therefore becoming more pure, having more consciousness, less ego, and therefore those passions are actually coming from a higher place, as opposed to that place of, I want many millions. That's my real passion. Does
Yeah, wow.
that
That's
make sense?
yes, it definitely does. You're a great teacher. You really understand something about
Thank you.
explaining. No, and it's really helpful because I started off before we started recording. I started this podcast because COVID hit and my wife and I had just gotten married and we were bored. And so we're like, why not? And I used to do hospice work, and I think Americans have a real devastating fear of death and dying, and it's debilitating. And I actually would argue it does play into our obsession with war and like all of these rules that we like to set. With that said, it somehow morphed into just like, oh, I'm just gonna like try to have conscious people on my show. So, like to push the 2%, the 3% rather, towards 4%. So what I'm trying to say is thank you. You're really like a warrior on that team, and it's immediately obvious. And your light shines out through Zoom and on the show. With all that said, I normally end by asking our guests to say whatever they want to our audience. I'm still going to end that way, but I thought of a kind of fun question. You seem like a person who might have a real interesting answer to this. It's my dad's favorite question to ask, and I've never asked him one on the show, but if you could transport and have a conversation with any one person, living or dead, who would it be and why? So, for example, like some people say Jesus, the Buddha, and I'm not trying to give you an answer, but have you ever thought about that? Is there any person that comes to mind?
Um, I would love to, if I had a conversation, I would love for it to be with uh, like pure source, whatever we call that.
Yeah.
Not even a god, but
Yeah.
like the essence that created the entire universe, and
Yeah.
ask it questions about why did you create this?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve here?
Oh
Yeah.
man, I am with you. I've never heard that answer, and I didn't even think of it ever. I'm gonna steal it from now on and probably give that. My dad likes to ask it when we have guests over for dinner, so I've answered the question like 100 times, but he's always asking a new person. So, wow. Well, thank you, Katya. That is incredible. Like I said, though, I do like to give my guests the floor at the end of the interview. Is there just anything you want to tell my audience?
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I love that you're doing this work and inspiring people and getting them to think about death. It's such an important topic, actually. And actually, I don't know if you guys have this in the States, but here we have, for example, death cafes where
No.
people, where people go there, or even if it's a regular cafe, but there is a death cafe time where people just go there and they open up the topic. They can talk about death and their fears and, their thoughts and that kind of thing. So I think it's such an important topic because it helps people focus on what's important in life. Ultimately, whatever happens when we die, that doesn't matter. But, bringing consciousness to what's important while we're alive is very elevated practice. I'd love to share that if people are looking for inspiration, I've got a book called Echoes of the Timeless, that people can learn a bit more about I guess, philosophies that we talked about here. Welcome to follow me on social media, katyabatalla.org. And yeah, I just love connecting with people and talking about deep things. And yeah, so thank you so much for the work that you're doing and the people that you're reaching. That's such awesome work.
That's awesome. And I did not have your book in our notes, so I will definitely add that to the
Oh,
notes and I'll put a link and everything. Is it
cool.
available on Amazon?
Yeah, all the
All the
places.
places. All right, cool, cool. So I'll definitely have a link for that
Yeah.
and a ways to find you. Well, thank you, Katya. It's been excellent meeting you, and I'll be in contact with you after this about the release of the show. But for our audience, as always, the best way to support our show is just to head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and you can sign up for the once a week emails that I send out. They're usually full of weird personal stories that are embarrassing, and my mom says, "I can't believe you wrote that, but I liked it." So thank you again, and thank you for tuning in. Once again, this has been an episode of Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and we will see you soon.